Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Kabir Considers. In this video, I'm going to react to the most corrupt cities in America. Now, corruption is everywhere, unfortunately. It's absolutely everywhere. I don't think there's a country on earth that doesn't have elements of corruption to it. But obviously, some places will have corruption to a higher degree than others. And the same thing goes for cities. There's going to be cities where the politicians, the business people are, they have a higher standard of integrity than others. And America is no different, right? America's huge, biggest economy in the world, so it's probably going to have quite a lot of it. But it might be localized to certain places, and I'm here to find out which one. So yeah, this video should be fun. Let's do it.
What is going on, everyone? Have you ever done some shady stuff? If you're a politician and your name's not Jimmy Carter, the answer is probably yes. Politics and corruption always have seemed to go together like peas and carrots, like movies and popcorn, like poor decision making and Jägermeister, like you get the idea. Political corruption isn't just in Washington, D.C. with the president, members of Congress, and senator type thing. No, we've seen police officers indicted, elected city officials hauled off in handcuffs, influence peddling operations with politicians reaching all new lows. That's just in the last few years. If you're looking for signs of corruption, you need to start with budget shortfalls, rumors of nepotism, corrupt police departments, and city officials going on vacations with real estate developers. Because we all know millionaires like to hang out with dudes that make $30,000 a year working at the city's planning office. Anyway, those are just a couple of the warning signs. With all the nonsense going on in the world of politics, I thought this would be a fitting subject this week. Before we get rolling, there is something you should all understand. I mean, we should all just understand it. Both sides of the aisle are guilty of nonsense. That's just the way it is. It's just the way it's always been. The only difference is what side of that nonsense are you on? So, what was the methodology for this list? That's an easy question. I looked to the city that has a lot of experience in shady politicians, Chicago. The University of Chicago, Illinois did a study in early 2019 with data from 2016, 17, 18 and came up with stats, charts, and opinions on what cities in the United States are the most corrupt. Here's that list of shame. Number 10, Las Vegas. If you didn't know about Las Vegas and corruption, you probably don't pay much attention to the news, especially, and for that I'm kind of jealous. I wish I didn't pay as much attention to the news.
I mean, all the gangster movies that are set in like Vegas, Goodfellas, Casino. Actually, is Goodfellas set in Vegas? No, I think it's just Casino. But yeah.
Kind of depressing. Anyway, after a 3-year FBI investigation, Las Vegas councilman Ricky Barlow pleaded guilty to fraud charges and resigned his seat in January of 2018. The Barlow investigation is, as you can imagine, the tip of a very large iceberg in Las Vegas. After the mass shooting by some coward in Vegas a couple years back, the FBI also uncovered some shady ways of doing things by the local law enforcement agencies in Vegas, including the Las Vegas cops actually arresting someone who called to report police brutality he witnessed on the streets in 2017. That kind of sucks. It's not the guy you're supposed to be arresting.
Really?
Number 9, Newark, New Jersey. Now this one might seem like something out of a fictional cop drama movie type thing, but I assure you it is not. The city of Newark had 442 corruption convictions between the years 2000 and 2014. That's convictions, not just accused, they were convicted. How does a city with a population of around 280,000 get so many corruption convictions? Do they do like a 2-day class on how to do shady stuff and rip off your constituents, and nobody showed up for day 2, which teaches you about how not to get caught? The watershed scandal exposed in 2016 actually blew local observers away with the brazenness of this illegal operation. This whole thing was just a bunch of people in charge of various things, apparently trying to outdo each other to see who's the biggest scumbag. Speaking of scumbags in New Jersey, 2 of Governor Chris Christie's aides got federal prison time in 2017 for their role in the Bridgegate corruption scandal. And then in 2018, the U.S. Attorney's Office took another guilty plea when a political fundraiser in Newark admitted to wire fraud and tax evasion. Newark is as corrupt as ever in 2019, I am sure.
People that get, imprisoned for corruption or convicted should have all their assets seized. Obviously, they've probably, put some assets in their family's name, but really and truly, they should seize everything. Because otherwise, where's the deterrent? People aren't going to stop doing it.
Number 8. Los Angeles, California. Since the turn of the century, Los Angeles has posted 507 corruption convictions, and that alone gets them on this list. They would have been higher, but they have like 10 times as many people, 10 times as many politicians, and 10 times as many departments than, say, Newark, New Jersey, in number 9. So the per capita saves them from being much higher on this list. If you go all the way back to the 1920s, you'd probably be shell-shocked reading all the crap people running the City of Angels have tried to pull off and failed at. I grew up in Los Angeles in the 80s and 90s, and I always remember some sort of corruption scandal going on. Then you have the LAPD, which has made great strides in the right direction in the last 20 years or so. Still got a long way to go by most people's accounts. The days of letting the cops who beat Rodney King go free are a distant memory, but clearly there are problems city officials need to get a handle on. Everyone in LA hates the DMV, even more so when they found out DMV officials were taking bribes. Most of the people...
DMV, Delta, Metro, what's the DMV? What does that mean?
Were pissed off they didn't know there was a bribe system in place that could have got them to the head of the line to renew their license. Ask anyone who grew up in Los Angeles and they will tell you the DMV is an all-day affair of suckage for the most minor things. Oh, and Compton's mayor was found guilty of corruption and sent to jail. LA has a long way to go.
The mayor.
Number 7.
Come on,
New
where are
Orleans.
the
The corruption in the Big Easy is legendary. They've made movies and written books about it. Several of each. Really, the whole state of Louisiana is pretty much bad. When the New Orleans FBI director left his post in late 2017, he summed up corruption in the Big Easy like this: it can't get much worse. He cited that the lack of term limits for sheriffs and district attorneys as hallmarks for bad government. The 334 convictions for various types of corruption since 2000 sort of proves the FBI director was right. 2 New Orleans cops went to jail in November of 2018 for bribery and conspiracy convictions, and they won't be the last. They're kind of going through a house cleaning type thing, so to speak. We'll see how that all works out here in the next couple of years. Number 6, New York City. Corruption convictions go back to the early 1800s in New York City. Like New Orleans, so many movies have been filmed and books have been written about the corruption in New York City. They almost take pride in it for some reason. How sad is that? The New York City Police Department corruption scandals over the years have always kept a city in the top 10 of most corrupt cities. In 2017, the city watched as 2 cops and a former prosecutor got arrested for a bribery scheme involving gun permits. In 2018, a Brooklyn Assembly member got hit with an 11-count indictment from the FBI. New York has gotten better in recent years, but it's going to take generations for them to change such a corrupt system. Even New York City street parking is preposterously corrupt. That's what one post said. That could be a great scary movie, you know, if you think about it. I want to do the voiceover for the trailer. You know, when meter maids go bad, you'll see what happens when you go 1 minute over at the wrong parking meter. This parking enforcement doesn't play nice. They'll even check your car insurance, bite the head off your Geico Gecko bobblehead doll, and spit it back at you. Yeah, it's that bad in New York City. They're going after the Geico Gecko.
Do you guys ever think we'll get rid of corruption? Like, personally, I don't think so. Things like the RICO law, the racketeering law, will help, but I just don't think we'll ever get rid of it. You know, there's always going to be temptation for people to make quick money.
Number 5, Houston, Texas. While places like Los Angeles and New York had slowed their pace on corruption cases by 2013, Houston, I guess, didn't want to look like quitters, and they went full steam ahead. In a single year, Texas Southern District posted 83 convictions, most of any city in the United States. 1 year. They don't seem to be slowing down either. Steve Stockman, who is a former Republican House member from Texas, he was indicted on 28 criminal charges in 2017. Stockman faced charges from stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars from charities, money laundering, wire fraud, and conspiracy. When he was arrested,
basically every type of fraud there is.
By FBI agents, Stockman tried to board a plane to the Arab Emirate. He was sentenced to 10 years in the big house. Number 4, Baltimore, Maryland. Baltimore is a city on the mend. A lot of people see it as turning around within the next 5 to 10 years, and if you know where they've been in the last 3 or 4 decades, you know that's saying something. If you go simply by the number of corruption convictions in the recent decades, Baltimore isn't that bad. However, the magnitude of the corruption events is, like when the FBI exposed the police department corruption. In 2018, a sergeant pled guilty to racketeering and other federal crimes, while a local businessman involved in the same case got 11 indictments for money laundering. There's also planting of evidence, all kinds of nasty stuff in there. Meanwhile, while all this is going on, the entire police department is still reeling from the Guns Trace Task Force, a scandal that could have been on an episode of any gritty cop show. In a 2016 investigation, the U.S. Department of Justice...
That skyline looks really nice. Even though there's nothing hugely tall, it just looks really nice here. Whenever I think of Baltimore, I think of The Wire. Like, Marlo coming, yo. Such a great show.
Has found that the Baltimore Police Department was abusive and corrupt on multiple levels. They had widespread racism at every stage of its enforcement and a constant source of constitutional right violations. The Justice Department explained that these practices have eroded the community's trust that is critical to the effectiveness of policing. The U.S. Attorney on the case described the group as both cops and robbers at the same time. They were basically preying on the citizens. And the more you read about that case, it just gets worse. I read about 30 minutes on the Gun Trace Task Force, that part alone, and it was bad. It was bad. But in January of last year, 2018, the mayor of Baltimore announced that she was firing the city police commissioner, Kevin Davis. Davis's successor, Daryl D. DeSosa, sailed through the confirmation process, and he was put in as the police commissioner for about a month, and then he had to resign because they realized he hadn't been paying his taxes.
Oh, come on. Really? The police commissioner isn't paying his
Number 3, Detroit. No one has considered Detroit a pillar of good, honest government in a very long time, if ever. But Detroit didn't make the University of Illinois Chicago's top 10 most corrupt cities in 2015. So that's good. 2015, they weren't on the list. They were on the straight and narrow. They had pulled it together, and they became a shiny beacon of hope and prosperity for 1 year. It was nice while it lasted, but in 2016, they went back on the list. Since then, things have taken a serious turn for the worse. The FBI's massive citywide corruption probe netted 12 convictions and charges against 19 different people as of December of 2018, and apparently they're still working on others. The FBI agents spent years listening to phone calls from more than a dozen people, including some politicians, businessmen, as part of this widening investigation into public corruption in the Metro Detroit area. Now, this is all according to sealed federal documents. Now, if they're sealed, how do we know about it? How did I get this information? I didn't break any laws. It was on a website. Really strange. I thought sealed means we're not supposed to know about it. Anyway, 6 Detroit cops were indicted on extortion charges that same month that they arrest all these people. I guess they're trying to get attention away from how many vacant lots.
This is a great shot, this aerial view. I like it. I'm just looking at this here. What is this, an intersection or a roundabout? Like, hold on a minute.
Attention away.
Like, because where are the traffic lights? Is it just a giveaway?
From how many vacant lots they have in Detroit. Google Map Detroit. It's scary how many vacant lots they have. So many people just up and bailed on this city and abandoned their homes. The city had to start knocking down the homes because people were squatting in them and just setting them on fire sometimes. As if Detroit hasn't had enough hurdles over the years. They get a bunch of a-holes that are supposed to be working on a fix. Instead, they're doing a bunch of shady stuff. Sad.
Very
Number
sad.
2, Chicago. At number 2,
where's number 1? What do you guys think number 1 will be? What's your guess? Let me know in the comments, and if you're right, I'll think of something to do.
we have the city of Chicago that carries the nickname the Windy City. The origins of Chicago's famous nickname aren't entirely clear. The most obvious explanation is that it comes from the frigid breeze that blows off Lake Michigan and sweeps through the city streets. However, another popular theory is that it was coined in reference to Chicago politicians who were said to be full of hot air. Whichever one you prefer. I like the politician one. If you want to go back and look at the history of political corruption, you would be wise to start with Chicago. It goes on way before Al Capone, but this would be the most famous era of Chicago corruption. The FBI actually had to bring in an outsider named Elliot Ness. This story's been told a million times, so in case you never heard it, or if you've heard it, the FBI brought in an outsider named Elliot Ness to go after the Chicago outfit led by Al Capone. With the corruption of the Chicago law enforcement agents at an epidemic status, Ness went through the records of all probation agents to create a reliable team, initially of 6 and eventually growing to about 10 or 12 people. They were called the Untouchables. They did a really good movie with Kevin Costner in it. Great movie.
This is so, like, why is this Because it's just a giant jelly bean. Like, what is the inspiration behind it? Like, what's the story?
Watch it. If you want a complete account of 1 year in big city corruption, take a look at 2016's University of Illinois Chicago's report on Chicago. You'll find false medical billing, planted evidence, prison bribes, aldermen heading to jail, and every other crime you'd expect in an infamously corrupt town. Not much has changed in the past few years. Far too many elected officials have seen life inside a prison. As I write this, one of Illinois' governors sits in jail for corruption. He was trying to sell Barack Obama's seat. I talked about this in a video just recently. But hey, they ain't the worst. And number 1. Washington, D.C. The District of Columbia got the nickname the Swamp for a reason, and has nothing to do...
Isn't that where the president lives? What?
With the fact my cousin calls his ex-wife the Swamp Witch. Now, the study that I got most of this information from put Washington, D.C. at number 1 because of various events and convictions in the Washington, D.C. metro area. But they really focused on what has been going on in big boy politics called the federal government. The study was about what's happening now, the last 3 years or so. That's how they do it every year. It's what's going on the last 3 years. So it was pointing a lot of fingers to the current administration. Sure, they've had a bad run of things. People are going to jail and things like that. But really, it's nothing new. This has been going on forever. They just happen to be the ones sitting in the seat this year. All administrations, all political parties do the same shady stuff. It's just a different angle this time. That's all it is. In a couple years, maybe 1, maybe 5 years from now, DC will be on the list with a new cast of characters, I guarantee. But yeah, Washington, D.C. is currently considered the most corrupt city in the United States for 2019. Good going, D.C.
That's incredible, though. Is that based on... I'd love to know more about that. Is it based on governors, senators taking bribes? Like who? Who are the people being convicted in DC? Really interesting stuff. I mean, like, because I don't have the numbers for the UK or Germany, France, any other G7 country, when Briggs says, 420 convictions, blah, 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 it sounds big because I don't have anything to compare it to. And so with that in mind, maybe the level of corruption in these cities is normal, even though really you would hope that we wouldn't have corruption, but that's just not a realistic, it's not a realistic desire. It's very idealistic. It's something that we should aspire to, but yeah, I don't see us ever having a society where people, with power are making deals with people with money. It's just, underhanded stuff. I just don't see that ever happening. Let me know, guys. Do you guys think we'll ever see that day? But yeah, I just don't think it'll ever happen. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.